Good evening. I'm going to make a quick address here. Uh, there has been, periodically, within the last 2 years, information available about an outbreak that occurred in Russia. Presumably, it occurred beginning in the end of 1977. The stories that have been available, the information's been available online, by the way, discusses how during the time frame this occurred that it impacted people of a certain age range, and particularly young people that were coming into their later teen years. And that the reason it was so disproportionately impacting people that age range is because there had been an earlier outbreak sometime before, and people had been inoculated or had developed an immunity based upon their previous exposure. So when it came back in the 1970s, 1977 and onward, there was already a immunity. It ended up impacting people who were not old enough to have been exposed to it. I am concerned about two matters, and I'm going to put it very bluntly. First, my concern is that the expiration of the Memorandum of Understanding that was in effect between the United States and Russia primarily, but not exclusively, that has expired within the last 10 years. And that was decided not to be re engaged by Russia at the time of its expiration was perhaps evidentiary of a process whereby elements connected to a premeditated campaign of emerging biological warfare were attempting to disproportionately impact people who had genomic data associated with past exposures to similar biological weapons paradigms, and that the chastisement and punitive measures engaged against Russia and other countries were actually an attempt to try to extort them into eliminating the stockpiles they had, which would have been samples of early biological weapons that may have been able to be used in some sort of vaccine and or some other kind of biodefense paradigm, were in fact there to be a emerging paradigm of genetically determinate biological warfare in the works. I believe that this is what we're dealing with right now. Secondly, my understanding is that there was an audit that was provided by the Office of Comptroller of Currency within the United States. It was published in 1981. This audit was connected to the railroad industry in the United States. During the 70s, there had been a successful accomplishment of a long-term campaign to address accounting procedures applied by the railroad sector in the United States. At that time, President Carter had signed into law a bill that authorized a particular consideration of taxation regarding a kind of accounting systematology which at the time was identified as being unique to the railroad industry. I contend it was not meant to maintain its unique role within the railroad sector, but rather was being identified by other sectors up to and including the energy sector at the onset of the Department of Energy, and was being identified within an emerging scheme associated with the nuclear energy paradigm, as well as what was already understood to be necessary transitions that were being discussed and were also allegedly being committed to regarding the gas and oil sector in the United States. Recently, I've come into information discussing intelligence paradigms, at the time attempting to focus on the gas and oil sectors of other countries from an intelligence perspective. This audit from the OCC revealed that for 3 years prior to the time frame during which the actual audit itself was being composed, there was a collection of data and comparative analysis of different aspects of the railroad sector in a determination between the application of the specific accounting standard for the railroad sector and the more conventional accounting standard that was being recommended and sought by other sectors. Those 3 years in the onset of the procedures regarding the recording of information correlate with what was announced as information concerning the onset of the alleged Russian flu. I think these are absolutely relevant factors right now. This is not the kind of thing that the year before a major anniversary on that specific report, you decide you're just going to cut off with some malarkey about justification for national expropriation and pegging it to disability insurance for people that worked in the sector. I understand there's very comprehensive implications involved. A lot of people were exposed to circumstances in the last couple of decades that didn't treat them fairly. And in consideration of all of the different elements at work concurrently, it's important that some aspect of their experience be addressed. But what occurred on February 3rd of 2021 is as much a crime as what it's trying to cover up. It cannot be allowed to abide. One way or another, it's not going to hold water. We're going to have to figure out very quickly and comprehensively how to address those matters. Are we going to soon find out that the exhumations of these graves concerning these murdered children in what is identified now as Canada are directly connected to the processes associated with what I've just discussed? Was there actually an intentional effort, coordinated, transnationally, perhaps connected through a specific nexus, wherein certain things were allowed to be laid to rest as long as they had completed and crossed the bridge to the next paradigm? See, this is another cycle. And I can hear you. They're doing it again. They're doing it. No. They're not going to do it again. Something's going to change. Something's going to be very different. We need to deal with this directly and honestly. This isn't about confidentiality. This isn't about a non-disclose. Why did every fucking country on the planet agree, after they agreed to cooperate with the Basel Conventions, to allow COVID-19 to occur? Why did you not, all of you, do what you had already committed to do by July of 2019? Who among you were arrogant enough to think you could just postpone application of that kind of disclosure until after you murdered millions of people? Who did you think you were? You did not have the authority to do that and get away with it. And every day you maintain your arrogance, you bring down on your soul